Holla ballers, what's going on? It's Preacher, and I am fucking hype, man. Super hype. I experienced something this week that I haven't felt in World of Warcraft for a really long time, and it was only about halfway through the brand new Karazhan that I put my finger on it. I was like, that's what's been missing, motherfuckers. That's what's been fucking missing. Why? Why does it have to be this way? So let's talk about that. So I have got Karazhan footage in the back, but I guess a lot of you haven't done it yet. Even Ghosty's not done it yet. So minimize. I won't spoil anything that's actually in there because it's truly something you should experience yourself. I know many of you might have already watched streams or whatever, but just for those of you who are like, I don't want to see what's in there, I'm going to leave it alone. So the announcement itself of a revamped Karazhan was a little off-putting to me, and I think I have historical precedent here to be a little pessimistic. The revamps, for any of us who were lucky enough to do the stuff originally, have never really lived up to the expectation. The revamped Zul'Gurub and ZA were lackluster, let's say that. Nax Ramus was lackluster. I preferred the old Scarlet Monastery, I'm going to say it. I preferred the old one. Some of them have been pretty good, but like Time Walking really kicked in the teeth, and now we have this weird moment where anytime someone brings up, you know, well, TBC heroics were actually really difficult, and then you've got all the smugs in the world saying, well, I did the Time Walking, and frankly, you're full of shit, right? That happens quite a lot. So, when Karazhan was announced as coming back, I was like, no, don't do it. Don't. And why? You might remember if you watched The Legacy of the Burning Crusade that I consider Karazhan to be almost the perfect dungeon. The perfect dungeon. There has not been a dungeon in history that has been played all the way till the end of the expansion just for fun. Like, maybe Molten Core was, but that's about it. I mean, not really. That was like gearing up alts, and I'm not saying people didn't run Kara to gear up their alts, but I was still there in my tier 6. Why? Karazhan was fucking fun. It was just really fun, and it was cool. Even if you were crushing the place down, just being in Karazhan was great. All the theatrics and just the spectacle of being in there was fantastic. And despite the fact it was the first raid, and not only a proper raid, it was like a 10-man raid, which at the time was considered like a weekend activity. Many of you probably don't realize this because it's different now with all the flex and stuff. But anything that was like less than 40 man or less than 25 man wasn't really considered a raid. It was like something you did with your buds because your guild was like twice the size of that. So Zul'Gurub and AQ20 in vanilla was a weekend thing. You used to book it in on a Saturday afternoon because your guild was like 50 or 60 people. So getting 20 people in there wasn't hard, right? Getting a 20-man raid together was an absolute joke. So you were going there at the weekends to just kind of chill out in there. Some guilds did progression in there. I'm not going to say they didn't. But other than that, it was considered like almost like you would consider a 5-man these days, I guess is a kind of equivalence, but close to. So when it was announced for revamp, I was just thinking, they're going to fuck this up. But then we saw that trailer. That trailer actually launched during a web show, if I remember correctly. And what we saw was, there was a Tumen. I was like, there's Morose. I'm like, there's Maiden. And then suddenly it showed us some extremely weird stuff. And I was like, oh, okay. Maybe this thing's got some fucking legs in it. I don't know. We'll see what happens here. Needless to say, when 7.1 launched, I intended to stream that day. And didn't. Why? 7.1, depending on your perspective on the game, and this is where everyone calls me an elitist, but for a raider, 7.1 was a really laborious, monotonous grind through a lot of shit, like doing 4 mythic zeros, which if you're raiding is a really sort of silly thing. It's like doing 4 heroics. It's just a pain in the ass. But for a lot of people, I recognize that, and you can always tell this, when Blizzard thinks something's good, but it's not working, they try and encourage people to get there. And usually they do that via carrots. And the carrot for AP and gear for a lot of people to step foot into the mythic system is probably really off-putting. I imagine, and I'd love to see your thoughts on this, that the divide amongst the community that we haven't seen since Wrath of the Lich King is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. And is actually returning if those walls had dissolved in some manner. And that was that when the LFD system came in, the ability to queue into heroics, we encountered millions of people that we didn't know existed, right? We had no idea these guys existed because you run in the circles you run in. If you're a raider, you tend to play a lot with other raiders. If you're doing other kinds of content like PvP, you tend to run with a lot of PvPers, right? What you don't encounter is the guys who flat out don't want to deal with any of that shit. But then when they could automatically queue anonymously, it was cross-server and all this stuff, so they could literally go in and they didn't have to think about it. They could just press a button and eventually they'll get into a dungeon and the game will take care of it for them. We encountered all these millions of people that we just didn't know existed, who had no drive or couldn't, for whatever RL reasons, get into any sort of organized content, right? And now that wall is being put back up, much to the request of the community. I've got to say, we don't feel like we've got a community anymore. Cross-servers kind of screwed things up, and automatic queuing has messed it up. So they're trying to build it back up, which is something the community said it wanted. Are they doing it in the right way? That's still debatable. We'll see how we're going in 6 months' time. But certainly the Mythic and Mythic Plus system is hugely off-putting to players who have always existed in the game. Always existed in the game, particularly those who, one, haven't got any time, hate or believe that everybody they encounter through the random system, even if you're using the pre-made system, is a complete douchebag, etc, etc, etc. They have no intention whatsoever of spending time in a pre-made system or fishing for groups in trade chat. Absolutely no intention of doing that whatsoever for a whole variety of reasons, and therefore they are not incentivized by AP and gear to go into that system, right? Which is cool. So I imagine, and this is speculation, I imagine that the amount of accounts, because we don't have this data, so I am guessing, and you guys can say I don't think so, that's fine, but I am guessing that there is a lot, and I mean way, way into the majority of people who have never done a Mythic dungeon, and that might be for whatever reason, it doesn't matter. And Blizzard probably believes this is a good system. And they probably believe that this is what people asked for, and especially in WoD, they wanted smaller group-based content that could provide similar progression to raids, which it does. I mean, most of my gear as a Mythic Raider is actually from Mythic Dungeons, and they're not seeing the uptake that they would like to see. So that carrot of AP and gear, which people know, like it's 7.2, the world quests are going to give like 80 gear, right? We're all prepared for that, right? I hope we are. No doubt we will see the forum threads saying, this is ridiculous, I can't believe this is going on, and so on and so forth. But we know it's going to happen. Those guys know it's going to happen. So they put a new carrot in, and that carrot is Karazhan. And they did make it account-wide. You have to get through this process once. But what it hopefully will do is incentivize those people to just check it out and realize, one, Mythic's not hard, right? It's not difficult content by any means. This is something you can step into. You can get some nice perps. You'll get a keystone. Maybe you're incentivized to go and try that keystone. All these kind of things go into motion. And they specifically chose ones that they think represent the Mythic Plus, the Mythic system quite well. So we had Halls of Valor, which looks fantastic. It's not the greatest dungeon. I actually consider it very boring, and it's super long, but it looks glorious. Violet Hold, which is super easy and fast, nice and easy. Vault of the Wardens, which is a fantastic dungeon. I don't care what anyone says about the second boss. I think it's a great dungeon. And, of course, what was the other one? Blackrock Hold, which is a great theme. It's a great, great theme inside that place. Not the best, but it's a great, great theme. And I think people will enjoy it. Or Blizzard probably believes that. And if this doesn't work, then, you know, they're kind of shit out of luck. Especially when people like me rock up and say, Karazhan is fucking awesome. Fucking awesome. Oh my god, it's so stupidly good. And what was the thing? They nailed several things here. Several things. The first one is the nostalgia itch. Very difficult to scratch that itch these days, because often when we do get these revamps and we try and go down nostalgia lane, many of us go, this is not what it was like, and this does not scratch that nostalgia itch. But they also knew that just trying to scratch the nostalgia itch wasn't going to cut it. So what they did is so clever. So clever. It's just the first few bosses, there's your nostalgia itch, but instead of just buffing them up and making them the same boss, they're essentially all different from what they were in the past, but still kind of the same. And more than that is they completely fooled anybody who had done this content before. And it's kind of ironic, but this is the phrase that makes sense, is you think you know what to do here, but you don't. And they played on that on every single boss. You think you know what to do here, but you don't. And in fact, more than that, if you try to do this the way it existed in the Burning Crusade, you're going to die and wipe horribly, which was the source of most of our wipes for the first couple of bosses until we said, look, forget everything you know about these bosses. Forget it, because it's different now. They've changed it and made them way more interesting. Attunement is great now. Attunement was a horrible boss in the Burning Crusade. It was so boring. My guild in its blues and greens one-shotted Attunement and was very disappointed. Morose works in a way where it's kind of similar. But if you try and do it how you used to do it in the Burning Crusade, around 50% Morose is going to fucking wipe the floor with your face unless you know what's about to happen. And the same with Maiden. And can I just express a feeling I'd not had for a long time is when the stage manager walks out and starts to give his speech. And my feeling of the reason I fell in love with World of Warcraft all those years ago just came flooding back is that anticipation every week of what this guy was about to say. And when it was a new encounter that you'd not seen before, you had this amazing moment where you're trying to work out what story is about to be told. Because that is the story of the opera event, is trying to figure out what is the story going to be and how is that going to play out, be it the Red Riding Hood story and the Wizard of Oz and all those kind of things. And of course, in this version, they've come up with whole new encounters to pair that up with, and they did them so well. I believe we all got the same one. I don't want to say what it is, but I believe we all got the same one across the pond and over here. So when that started happening, I got this. They scratched my nostalgia itch. They scratched it so fucking well. I was like, oh my god, this is great. And then they threw in all the guys in the backstage area, and you can read the reviews of the old stuff, and they really played on the theme of what Karazhan was all about, which was just absolute wacky silliness. So let's talk about wacky silliness. Something for me that has been missing from World of Warcraft for probably the last 6 years is joy in the world, happiness in the world, fun in the world. Every single expansion for the last sort of 6 years has been utter doom and gloom throughout. Like non-fucking stop grim blackness, right? Just absolute darkness thrown everywhere. And Legion is the epitome of that. There is not a corner of the Broken Isles which isn't the most miserable fucking place I have ever been to. I can't fly into Thunder Totem most days without their homes being smashed to pieces and they're just being fucking invaded in their hometown. There's crack addicts scoured all over the streets of Suramar. Fucking Stormheim's got the literal portal to hell in it. Val Sharar's corrupted by a nightmare. You know what I mean? Asuna is the story of a great leader who made the right choices for his people, who is now scorned for eternity for making that decision by those people. Everywhere you go in the Broken Isles is just misery after misery after misery. And that's also highlighted in the dungeon content. None of those dungeons are great. Hell, you're fucking riding the ship of the damned in one of them, you know what I mean? You're either in an underground cave of lava and nightmares that's going on, or you're running through a forest that's corrupted and polluted and everything hates you, and the souls of once great heroes are just trapped and twisted and morphed into horrible, horrible things. It's wall-to-wall fucking balls, right? Wall to wall, dirty, stinky balls everywhere we go. And it's kind of been like that for a while. But that's not the game I really fell in love with. And I think if you make everything grim and dark, it all becomes grey. If you make everything like this horrible, horrible thing, it all becomes grey to you. You become so used to the next big bad. Okay, everything's terrible. We're here to do something about it. But World of Warcraft doesn't appear to have the systems in place to make any difference. Like, it bugs me, and I'm sure there's a law reason for it. In Suramar, we have the fruit of victory, right? That grows from the tree. If you're exalted, you get the fruit of victory. And still, Suramar's like a shithole. But we can only have the fruit in our little cave. Anybody outside the cave, they're fucked. No, you fucked. You're fucked. Because I've got the fruit. You can't have the fruit. So, what are you going to do? That's about it. We're going to live here with our apples of justice. And you guys are all fucked, essentially. And so, that's where we're at. That's where we're at. We can't seem to modify the world. And a lot of the stuff that I really enjoyed back in the old days, look at me getting all rose tinted, but going to places like Red Ridge Mountains and seeing an actual community alive and well and doing things. Yeah, there was a dark underbelly to that, but the impression was everything was fine, and then you uncover the contrasting darkness that's going on there. You can go to various places in Azeroth where things are fine, seemingly, right? They might have a minor issue, but it's not a big deal. Yeah, we can't have exactly a nice, friendly world. That would be a terrible game, right? There's got to be some sort of enemies going on there. But you can visit various areas which aren't all doom and gloom. They're not all the end of the world. There are places that easily contrast with that. You go from Red Ridge to the Burning Steppes. Remember that contrast? You're like, oh shit, this place is fucked. right? And you go from Westfall, which is not exactly the happiest place, but for the most part, it's a farmland that's got some problems with pirates and fucking crazy farming machinery, but it's not the end of the world that's going on there, right? And then you cross the bridge into Dustwood, you're like, oh, fuck me. This place is crazy. That contrast is really important. It's important for me as well. And I often find that in the last 6 years, it's a lot of the banality of always... I've saved Azeroth now, what, like 12 times from utter annihilation? And nobody's happy about it. Nobody's happy. No one's like, oh, fuck yeah, you know what? We killed the Lich King. We killed the fucking Lord of Fire. We killed 2 old gods, right? We killed some Titans. We've dropped some fucking guy who was literally sending a message to space. He was going to annihilate the planet and all this stuff. We've done all these things and everyone's still like, oh, fuck me. You know what? You know what's going on now? Fucking Legion's back again, bro. And I was like, I've already killed the fucking Legion. I dealt with the Legion. I did that ages ago. And they're like, yeah, they're back again, man. It's like, can't fucking win, can we? No, we can't. Karazhan, though, is just fun. It's just fun. And that's been a loss for me for quite some time, is just being in somewhere that was just fun. And I also think this gives this contrast is when I went into Karazhan and I played through it, and it was really late. We did it after the raid. Is that I just wanted to see more and more and more of it. I was like, I just want more and more. And I wasn't even caring about mechanics and things like that. And it then got to me thinking is that when everything does become this grey, that's when you tend to focus more heavily on mechanics and systems in place of the game, you know, moaning about the legendaries, because you don't care about the content because it's not that fun. I think we're all fair to say the Emerald Nightmare raid, for those of us who do raid, ain't that fun. It's not. In fact, most of most of the bosses there are boring as fuck, man. They're really boring, and we're hoping they're going to pick this up because we don't want another Emerald Nightmare where it's just a chore to get through and you just care about the drops. You care about like maximizing your deeps, which is all stuff you should do, but you should be having fun doing it. Am I padding here? Am I not? I've got brambles on me. Okay, I've got to run in circles now. You know, stuff like this that's just not engaging and fun. But I've got to say, being, without spoiling too much, going down a certain area and changing the size of your character to then fight something that is just so completely absurd. I just had a smile on my face all the way through it. And the message I want to convey with this video is, Blizzard, more of this, more fun. Be creative. Be creative. This is a fantasy RPG. It bugs me that your zones are geographically and aesthetically normal. I get that it makes sense when I move from High Mountain to Suramar. It makes total logical sense. I don't care. What I want is what I had in the original game. You think about the contrasting zones that you traveled through. You went from Red Ridge to the Burning Steppes. It was fucking obscene. You crossed like 20 yards and suddenly it's a living nightmare. But on the other side, it's all right. It's not too bad. It's pretty good. And then you cross that bridge into Dustwood. And then you go down to Stranglethorn Vale and suddenly you go from this desolate world into like this really thriving jungle for some fucking reason. I love that. I absolutely love that. And then you look at Mists of Pandaria. It was kind of foresty and a little bit mountainous in some areas. And there was kind of one weirdy area, but that was about it. And then you go into WoD where there's the typical zones. There's like Frost Zone and then there's like Forest Zone. And they're not that dissimilar for the most part. It's just like a color palette swap for the most part. But nothing that made you go, whoa, this zone is cool. Like Spires of Iraq is like a little bit more mountainous. But it's no Thousand Needles, right? It's no Tanaris to 1,000 Needles, which is a completely different world. I go to Tanaris, I feel like I'm in a desolate desert wasteland. There's that huge open plain of just rotting bones and stuff. And then you go over to the 1,000 Needles, or the new 1,000 Needles, and many of you guys will know it, where you're sailing a little boat around, right? Such a contrast. It's drenched in water, and then just a few feet down below, there's the most barren, desolate wasteland ever, but right in the middle of it is a volcano where there's dinosaurs and shit, right? That's World of Warcraft. It's fucking crazy. And you look at Cataclysm, they dedicated an entire zone to Harrison fucking Ford being Indiana fucking Jones and finding Schultz the Goblin. That's wow. If I was to ask people for quotes from the Cataclysm era, I'm sure many of them would come back to me saying, no one rides the lady. Right? That's the stuff we love. That's what I love anyway. I can only talk from my experience. That's what I absolutely love. And that was the feeling that Karazhan recaptured for me. Because even within that one dungeon, and this was the same as its TBC counterpart. In that one dungeon, you start in one place that kind of makes sense because you're going into this tower. And by the end of it, you're in, like, space fighting a demon Eridar Lord who's firing infernals out of the sky. And this version of Karazhan goes way, way beyond that as well. It's a fantasy RPG for me, which means they can go crazy because they write the story. They can write places into the game that are really just absolute silly fun. And it doesn't need to be all the time. Just these odd pieces of content like this. But they give such a dramatic contrast to the world outside. And that change makes that dark gloominess so much more interesting for me. I'm much more like, oh shit, now things are getting serious, if I've been doing content that wasn't that serious and was just plain silly fun. So I hope that was non-spoiler 3 for Karazhan, but I've got to say, this was the absolute... I can easily say it's the best 5-man dungeon I've ever done. Ever. I enjoyed it throughout, and I'm sure that my... the nostalgia itch that I had for the first sort of half of the dungeon helped that, and other people will probably say, well, I didn't do the old Karazhan, so it didn't get that itch for me. But for what... I mean, let's just put it one way. In Wars of Draenor and in Legion, I would never expected to see 4 movie characters inside a 5-man dungeon for no apparent reason whatsoever, and just been laughing my ass off that they were there. And I got that in Karazhan. And I was like, you know what? This totally reminds me of classic Blizzard. This reminds me of guys who were in on the jokes that were flying around at the time. And the closest we've had to that for a while is achievement names. And a lot of it fell into cliche. You know, we've got to have the poo quest. We've got to throw the fruit in the basket quest. We've got to do those things because people expect it. It's like, no. Have fun with it and do something silly. You know what's going on in the outside world. You guys aren't crazy. Stop trying to, like, modify WoW to be the same but different. And show us that you're still video game creators and you still do these really silly things. You know why? Because you fucking can. You fucking can. And it's really cool. There ain't nobody going to complain that those 4 characters are in Karazhan, even if it makes no logical sense. At a stretch, you could kind of make it make sense. But it doesn't matter. That's not why they're there. They're there because it's fucking funny. And that was what a lot of World of Warcraft was for me for a long, long time. Until it became, like... utter annihilation is at our door every single fucking moment of the day. I can't talk to fucking anybody without them telling me that, oh my god, we're about to die. We're about to die. Yeah, let's take a little break from that, and that line will mean more to me. If you keep telling me every single fucking moment of the day that we're about to fucking die, I lose interest, because I know at this point we're not about to die. I know that. So stop fucking trying to make me care about it without showing me a part of the world that's not like that. Does that make sense? I hope so. Love to see your thoughts on it though for those guys who've been in there, but fucking what a joy. Take it easy, boys and girls. I'll see you again. Bye-bye.